The story begins with our protagonist being greeted by a supreme being in a strange, ethereal place. She tells him that he has been summoned to Midgard through an otherworlder's summoning spell, and she introduces herself as Lady Nolan. Then almost immediately she apologizes, explaining that he was accidentally caught in a summoning ritual meant for someone else. The protagonist confusedly points out the contradiction. She just welcomed him, yet says his presence here is a mistake. Nolan elaborates, explaining that the otherworlder's summoning system randomly selects individuals from countless worlds. He was excluded from the list of potential targets, but somehow, the system picked him anyway. This revelation leaves the protagonist stunned, and Nolan further clarifies that the summoning spell itself is inherently dangerous. The laws of Earth and Midgard differ so drastically that the act of summoning risks destabilizing Midgard entirely. This danger led to the spell being forbidden, yet a reckless nation still went through with it. Nolan noticed the spell's activation and intervened to minimize the damage, but she couldn't stop it entirely, and she managed to bring him to her domain for now. The protagonist asks if others summoned by the spell are in the same place. Nolan shakes her head, explaining that they were the proper targets and were sent to the Holy Sidonia Empire, where the spell originated. He realizes his summoning was purely accidental and asks her to send him back to his world, but Nolan regretfully admits that this is impossible. She explains that she was furious at the summoners for their recklessness, so she patched things up, ensuring they would never be able to use the spell again. Her explanation grows overly technical, so the protagonist gets overwhelmed and asks for a simpler version. So Nolan bluntly tells him that she's made it impossible for him to return to Earth, and even if it were possible, he no longer has a body waiting for him there. We then see that our protagonist is revealed to be nothing more than a soul in the shape of a fluffy fur ball, leaving him shocked at his lack of a physical body. Nolan apologizes, explaining that the summoning blowback caused this, as he wasn't meant to be a target. He frustratedly tells her that an apology won't fix his predicament and demands to know what will happen to him now, so Nolan urges him to give up on his old life and start anew as a resident of Midgard. He hesitantly asks if this means he'll be sent to the Sidonia Empire like the others, and Nolan admits she could send him there. However, she warns that the Sidonia Empire is a difficult and dangerous place, and as an accidental summon, his treatment there would likely be terrible. This disheartens him, but Nolan reassures him, saying she feels responsible for his situation and intends to help him. She reveals her plan to send him to a different nation, one where he can have a better chance, and promises to give him her blessing as compensation. Confused by her words, he listens as she explains that this situation resembles the premise of video games and anime in Japan, and that shit means that being sent to a fantasy world with opportunities for adventure. She enthusiastically claims it'll be exciting for him, though he feels nothing but anxiety. Ignoring his doubts, Nolan asks him to try opening his status window, and to his surprise, it appears when he thinks about it. The window shows he is now 17 years old, and despite being a 40-year-old salaryman in his previous life, he doesn't have a job listed. So Nolan explains that in this world, the concept of a salaryman doesn't exist. Instead, there are combat jobs like swordsman, mage, knight, thief, and hunter, as well as production jobs such as herbalist, alchemist, blacksmith, and carpenter. And since fighting doesn't interest him, he expresses his desire for a production job. So Nolan obliges and grants him a skill suited for production work along with a few other useful starter skills to aid him in his new life. She advises him that by utilizing his skills through practice and effort, he will eventually unlock a formal job title. And with that, she sends him to the continent of Asgard to begin his journey. The protagonist then gets teleported to a serene spot by a pond, where he catches a glimpse of his reflection and thinks he looks pretty hot in his new form. Checking the items Nolan gave him, he finds some food, money, and a knife. Opening his status window, he realizes it might be problematic if people find out he has Nolan's blessing, and that thinking makes him discover that he can conceal his skills, so he hides both his blessing and his item box skill. As he continues exploring his abilities, he notices he also has several magic skills. Like any typical otaku, he decides to try them out. He avoids testing fire magic, worried it might accidentally set the area ablaze. Instead, he starts with earth magic, followed by wind and water magic. Watching the spells in action, he feels a rush of excitement, thinking to himself that this truly is a fantasy world. Determined to learn more, he sets out to find a village. While walking, he stumbles upon a piece of wood and uses his appraisal skill to identify it as treant wood. This high-quality material comes from a treant monster and can be used to craft staves, magic items, and spear shafts. Thrilled with the discovery, he uses his blacksmithing skill to shape the wood into a sturdy spear. Observing the rich resources of the area like treant wood, he speculates that the plants might also be unique. And after searching further, he discovers the region is brimming with useful herbs. So he starts gathering as much as he can, but he realizes it won't all fit in his bag, so he stores the excess in his item box, which conveniently has unlimited storage. Suddenly, a girl runs toward him in a panic and hides behind him, and he sees that she's being chased by a massive, ferocious rabbit. He quickly notices how unnaturally large the rabbit is and grabs his spear to defend her. But the girl warns him that the rabbit is carnivorous, making him even more nervous. As the creature leaps at him, he manages to strike it down with his spear, and that shit kills him immediately. Takumi stands in disbelief, amazed that he was able to defeat such a dangerous beast. But this victory earns him a warrior job, even though he doesn't want it. The girl thanks him for saving her, and he asks where she's from. She explains that she's from Board Village and had wandered into the forest while gathering medicinal herbs. He asks if he can accompany her back to the village, and she happily agrees. He feels relieved and smiles, but before they leave she asks if he isn't going to take the horned rabbit with him and mentions that the rabbit is considered quite a delicacy. He quickly stores the rabbit's corpse in his item box, explaining that while it can't hold living things, storing non-living objects like corpses isn't an issue. The girl is amazed at his item box skill and compliments him, and then introduces herself as Molly, and he responds by introducing himself as Takumi. The scene then shifts to the Holy Sidonia Empire, where the three summoned humans find themselves confused about their situation. A cloaked woman then approaches them, welcoming them to a new world. She explains that they have been summoned to use their powers as heroes to save this realm. However, her cryptic explanation only deepens their confusion. She then introduces herself as Elizabeth, the first empress of the Holy Sidonia Empire, and reveals her face, and her expression exudes the air of someone who might suck your damn soul in some dark alley. Then we see that among the three, a girl named Akane suddenly gains a unique skill called Revelation from Lady Nolan. This skill grants her divine insight, instructing her to trust her instincts as they will guide her to the right decisions. Following her instincts, Akane decides not to trust Elizabeth, because everything about her appearance screams dangerous. Back in Board Village, Molly's parents warmly thank Takumi for saving their daughter. Her father introduces himself as Banga the hunter, and her mother as Martha. Takumi asks if it would be alright for him to stay in the village for a while, and they happily agree, mentioning that their village is abundant in herbs and even has a vein of ore nearby, which excites Takumi. Banga then introduces Bobbin, who stands nearby, as the village blacksmith. Takumi then thanks the villagers for letting him stay, but they inform him there's no inn in the village. But instead they offer to build him a home, which makes him genuinely happy. They show him a plot of land where his house will stand, and Bobbin gathers the villagers to help with construction. Takumi decides to pitch in as well, using his earth magic to level the ground. The villagers are impressed by his magical skill, but the effort drains a significant amount of his mana. So Banga advises him to conserve his energy and let the rest of them handle the work. Later, Takumi's new home is completed, and he uses his carpentry and blacksmithing skills to craft some basic furniture to make it livable. Feeling settled, he checks his status window and wonders if it's possible to change his warrior job. To his surprise, an option to switch jobs appears, so he excitedly selects alchemist and blacksmith as his main jobs and dives into work. Together with Bobbin, he collects ores of iron, silver, and copper. He even discovers a rare mana-infused material called magic iron ore, deciding to smelt all of it into ingots. Takumi begins with the iron ore, noting that in this world, the process doesn't require a furnace thanks to magic. Using a combination of his alchemy and earth magic, he successfully transforms the raw ore into ingots, but the process consumes a huge amount of mana. But he pushes himself anyway to continue, determined to create as many materials as possible. Later, Molly brings him dinner, only to find that he's collapsed from overexertion. When Takumi regains consciousness, he explains that he pushed himself too hard and drained his mana completely. Martha gives him a sharp lecture for being reckless, and Banga hands him a healing potion, which restores his energy. And from that point on, Martha and Molly check on him regularly to ensure he doesn't overdo it again. Takumi diligently continues his alchemy, refining ores into ingots over several days. And along the way, he manages to extract small quantities of precious metals like gold, lead, tungsten, titanium, and tin. Using these materials, he crafts high-quality utensils and tools, and also his relentless effort causes his alchemist and blacksmith levels to soar. Afterward, we see Takumi honing his smithing skills under Bobbin's guidance, assisting him with fire magic during their work. And together they craft a knife, and Bobbin proudly declares it his finest creation yet. Takumi's blacksmith level skyrockets to 40, while his alchemist level lags behind at 33, much to his annoyance, as his real goal is to excel as an alchemist. Later, Takumi approaches Banga, asking for some potions so he can try making his own using the herbs he's gathered. Banga agrees but only has basic potions to offer, which Takumi gladly accepts. Soon, we see Takumi brewing potions like a mad scientist or an evil witch in a fantasy story. The process reminds him of his childhood, when he would experiment endlessly. Once his potion is complete, he notices its color is different from Banga's and can feel faint mana radiating from it. He deduces this is due to his use of water prepared with water magic and becomes eager to learn more potion recipes. Not stopping there, we later see Takumi chewing on random poisonous plants on purpose, and when he gets poisoned, he heals himself with his heal spell, a painful but effective method to gain resistance to poison and paralysis while leveling up his light magic skill. He notes that this dangerous method is the quickest way to develop such resistance, though it's far from pleasant, but thanks to this reckless training, he unlocks purification magic. But just as he reflects on his progress, a massive level 25 armored boar appears before him. Armed with his spear and knife, Takumi prepares to defend himself. The boar then charges and Takumi hurls his knife at it, but the blade bounces off harmlessly. He then desperately strikes with his spear, which shatters into countless pieces. Resorting to spells, he casts Rock Ball and Wind Cutter, but neither has any effect. Frustrated and cornered, Takumi scrambles for a plan. But suddenly he notices movement behind him, and he finds a poison spider lurking nearby. Assuming the worst, he prepares for another fight, only to realize the spider is injured. And before he can react, the boar charges again. So Takumi braces for impact, but the spider unexpectedly comes to his aid, blinding the boar and causing it to miss its attack. Though the boar is disoriented, Takumi remains at a loss on how to finish it. But in a flash of inspiration, he uses his alchemical decomposition skill, and the spell dissolves the armored boar from within, defeating it completely. As the boar falls, Takumi gains martial arts and magic combat skills, leaving him in disbelief that his crafting magic saved him. Takumi then checks on the poison spider, noticing it's on the verge of death. Grateful for its help, he thanks the spider, assuming it risked itself to save him. Using his heal spell, he restores the spider's strength and prepares to leave, thinking everything is fine now. However, a notification suddenly pops up, informing him that he can tame the spider. Surprised by the option, he hesitates, but when the spider looks at him with its shiny, hopeful 8 eyes, makes it impossible for Takumi to walk away. He asks if it wants to join him, and upon agreeing, he tames it, unlocking a telepathic connection. He then curiously asks if it already has a name, but it doesn't. Noticing the maple leaf-like pattern on its back, he names it Maple. And as soon as the spider accepts the name, it evolves into a killer spider, and even its severed leg regenerates. Later, Takumi returns to the village, proudly showing the massive armored boar he defeated. The villagers are stunned, amazed he managed to slay such a formidable beast alone. Molly, however, quickly notices the large spider perched on his back. Alarm spreads among the villagers, but Takumi reassures them, explaining that Maple is a tamed monster. Banga is floored, remarking that taming insect-type monsters is almost unheard of. Not wanting to linger on the subject, Takumi redirects their attention to the boar, suggesting they focus on preparing it for a feast. The villagers are shocked at his generosity in sharing such a valuable catch, but he shrugs it off, happy to share. Soon the entire village gathers for a celebratory feast. While they eat, Banga hands Takumi the boar's fangs and leftover hide, explaining that these items can fetch a good price in a big city. Takumi curiously asks about the nearest city, and Banga tells him it's a place called Bolton. Then we see Maple playing with the village children, endearing herself to the community. Watching the lively scene, Bobbin remarks that the village has become brighter and more cheerful since Takumi's arrival. Banga agrees but reflects that Takumi doesn't seem like the type to settle in a small village forever. Meanwhile, in Midgard, Nolan observes Takumi from afar, pleased to see he's thriving. Another Supreme Being joins her, asking what Nolan expects from the boy. Nolan feigns ignorance, but the Supreme Being presses, revealing that she gave Takumi a special body, her blessing, and even sent him a full year into the past before the Holy Sidonia Empire's summoning spell was activated. Nolan dismisses the notion that she has any deeper intentions, but her expression betrays her true thoughts, hinting that she may have a deeper plan for Takumi's future. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.